predict what's happening. Not only that we predict what may happen, but give a solution, prescribe some action that may be taken. Now, this is where human in the loop comes in. We're not the physician in any way, shape, or form where we automatically prescribe things to do, but we may recommend something where a clinician is looking at them as the human in the loop and decide an action to take. So some of the ones that are very popular in here that some of you may be very involved in. Again, I'm not going to read all of these to you. Hopefully you can follow my cursor a little bit. But we're looking at a lot of the genetics. So it's not just technology and systems and all that. There's a lot of things going on in understanding the genetics and how our RNA and DNA and all that work together. The AI-driven diagnostic I talked about. Another huge thing, wearable devices and implantable devices. I don't know how many of you have ever had a pacemaker put in on your heart, but we now are in a position where we can program that pacemaker from anywhere in the world. The Internet of Things is here. So an implantable device that is configurable from outside there, you can have actually a Bluetooth phone to go in and look at the statistics. Most patients won't understand what that means, but there's a dashboard to help them understand. There's some regenerative medicine. That means stem cell therapy. And what we do at Children's, we're high research, a lot of research and experimental things. So that gives us a severe, I shouldn't say severe, but a critical proprietary protection of data. Some of the things we're doing are world-class, leading edge type things that we don't want to make that available everywhere. And when we look at our AI models later on, those are things we need to be aware of. And also bringing in technologies that's augmented visual support, being able to look through. Surgery's been around for a while with it's controlled by a machine with laser precision, et cetera. But now we're getting to a point where there's diagnostics going on before surgery's happening, and we need to be able to support that from an infrastructure perspective. And then the security. In the United States, this is definitely a critical item, is to make sure patient health is secure and not made available elsewhere. So clinical innovations is one of our pillars of which a lot of things are happening. And we need to be staffed up with resources and et cetera. The skill sets required for these are enormous. More so on this in the clinical side than in our system side, but we need to have that available on the system side in order to be able to not only install it and bring it up, but support it accordingly. Next one, just general administrative innovations. In order to run big hospitals or even small hospitals, but in order to run a healthcare organization, there's an administrative portion of it. Somebody needs to be able to make sure the doctors are assigned where they need to be, that they're properly paid, that they have their benefits defined, and not just the doctors, but the doctors to the nurses, to the people that are cleaning the rooms for hazmat confirmation, to the ambulance drivers. So we have a lot of administrative things. So talk about they're transforming healthcare, EHR, EMRs, emergency services, interoperability, the workflows. Workflow management has become a very critical skill, especially on the administrative side, because you go through a workflow. I mean, if you're in an organization that pays you every 2 weeks, that means there's a workflow of a 2-week cycle of your pay. So we need to understand that, and we need to understand all the factors that work into that. And there, we actually implemented the Workday product a year ago that does our human resources piece. It does our supply chain management. It does all our financial reporting. It does our university faculty support, and it also does support our research. So that's a very 5 different work streams, 5 different areas of the hospital integrated into one. So from a skill set, that was extremely critical to understand workflow. So the whole idea is cost cutting, efficiency, and free up the clinicians to be able to focus on the patient as opposed to the administrative piece. And that's where the biggest benefit came from. Some things, other areas where that's happening, the whole optimization I talked about, faster interface access, integrated patient histories, the robotic process automation. And this is focused on the administrative side. We're talking about billing, scheduling, claims processing. And now, if an IV needs to be placed in a patient uh, in the hospital itself, they're just able to scan a code and it's able to update everything automatically as far as the patient record, et cetera, et cetera. So that helped one ensure that the wrong medication is not being given. Two, to make sure that we're tracking the amount of usage and the appropriate timing for all the patients. We may be putting it in too early, but they're able to track different things. Are they taking too much liquid, not enough, et cetera. Interoperability is data sharing across systems. We're able to standardize more and more of this data. Uh, for years, ever since I've been in the industry for 40 plus years, data integrity has always been a difficult piece to maintain the quality, and it's still there. We're still dealing with some legacy data from many, many years ago. So making sure that our data is there for the interoperability. And here I'm talking about it from an administrative perspective, but mainly so the administrative works up with the clinical. The administrative is where the patient information is held. The clinical is where the patient treatment is done. So we need to have that synchronization. Then again, predictive staffing. There just aren't enough skilled people to be able to meet all the needs with a large pool of reserve. So we need to be able to make sure critical times of year during holiday seasons that we have people available, that they are aware of their shifts and that we're able to track, et cetera, which is predicting our staffing. What are our staffing needs? I'm actually involved in the job right at the moment for resource allocation for our PMO. I'm in the enterprise business infrastructure group. So that workday that I talked about is one tool that's involved in that. But we still also need to make sure that we're staffed appropriately for different things, including, believe it or not, this is a real issue, that we have a little bit more staff available during the full moon in the maternity ward because the birth rate in the United States spikes up a little bit during maternity ward. It spikes up quite a bit in the weekend before a major holiday. So we need to use different tools in order to make sure resources are available for that. And then in the United States, we have a lot of things with regulatory compliance. But that's not just the states. There's World Health requirements that have to be tracked and used. We just all went through the COVID, and we'll hear things, pros and cons about the COVID. But one of the things that was involved there that was critical was the gathering of data and the normalization of data, standardization of data to be able to use across the globe. And then finally, the whole cybersecurity piece. The world is susceptible to attacks from different places for cybersecurity. Ransomware being one, where they actually come in, put ransomware somewhere in your system, and it disrupts everything. And until you pay them a certain amount of money, you can't get it back. That's a major issue. Not to mention the concerns of people being able to go in and basically hack to get health information on individuals, maybe even locations of where they are as far as receiving medical care, et cetera. So that's the cybersecurity administration comes from our administrative side, that we have certain roles defined, that they have certain skill sets, that they are able to do cybersecurity, and we can do a link back, that they can't go into a certain, or they have a certain permission level in one application in order to perform the task that's validated by an administrative system. Workday is one I talked about. And this is just an example of how intricate these things are becoming. And one of the things that Workday brought into the picture was the idea of role-based security. So instead of security based on an ID and password, is what role it is performing. I'm not going to go into this. This is actually a picture from Workday itself. Its source is down here at the bottom. But we had to adapt our whole processes of doing that. And another thing that Workday brings in is this concept of what they call a calculated field, which is being able to manipulate data that has to be high security because it allows you to write algorithms and updates data. So that just can't be granted to anybody. So the entire security domain for cybersecurity and also physical security piece became very important. Plus, from an IT side, this also gets authenticated through Active Directory. So we have these different relationships happening that we're constantly building on. And our biggest challenges are not technical challenges. Our biggest challenge is just the industry and the changes, the ever-changing things in healthcare. Because one of the challenges within healthcare is people get a lot of information sources and they come wanting to know more about it. And where we are as far as implementing it, we may suddenly get a request, such and such patient came in, they saw this type of technology, how close are we to doing it, or is it a radar, is that our roadmap, et cetera. The business processes, those have always been a challenge because technology is only as good as the processes and the people that support it. Our culture in general, these are human issues. People want to make sure that their organization is in the position that they think it should be in. I use the term authority there, but they want to make sure, and from an administrative side, I'll go back to a simplistic example as far as pay scales. To make sure that only the right people have the authority for pay treatments, or if there's some sort of special payment process that's going on. There's an empowerment fear, and by that I mean we did a lot of things in an agile scrummy type environment, but not true agile. Everything's a hybrid. And that environment talks about product owners being empowered. Well, they were afraid to let them be truly empowered. So there were a lot of times we'd try to do a call, and the vice president wanted to be in there, even though they had people empowered. They had this FOMO, which is fear of missing out. So we had to deal with that fear of the people that were responsible and accountable for some of these functions. So we're bringing in the organizational piece, and that's a major change is happening. That's not necessarily change happening, more highly emphasized than it was before. And also, as human beings, we tend to overcomplicate things. Lots of people, we want to keep it simple, keep it simple. And when you try to keep it simple, they will challenge, oh, but we're not doing this. So from a project management perspective, it's dealing with all those different expectations from a business side, not just technical capability, but also workflow capability. The workflow function is designed in certain ways, which matches with security in order to perform it, which matches with the timeframes and the business cycles that you're dealing with, such as payroll, et cetera. So lots of different pieces there that are challenges that aren't the least bit technical, but tying those pieces together. So here, one more thing on Workday, end-to-end testing, because now we are doing from beginning to end. When I first started in the IT world here, our testing was pretty segmented. I mean, we only did one piece to another. It worked coming in and gave the answer going out. And there could have been 3 or 4 downstream systems that we made the assumption that if we met their standard, we met the interface criteria, the service level agreements, the interface agreements, whatever, that we'd let them worry about the other piece. Well, now, and we found this out, especially in Workday, it is end to end. We need to do all those pieces. So we need the journey map, proxy user testing. That's really easy. That's think of us authorizing something. I request vacation time, it needs to be authorized, I can take it. So that's 2 steps. And in the real world, those are 2 different people. To do testing, we would do proxy, means I can go in as the user, type it in, then proxy in as their supervisor and approve it. Well, that's simulating. So there's some risk involved that the proxies don't always reflect the real world. And we also had the issue with calculated fields, the test scripting. These are extremely complicated tests, lots of different pieces. Our journey maps could have as many as 14, 15 functional steps in them. So that became a lot of work in order to happen, a lot of administrative work, and also difficulty in validating the test because as you go closer and closer user acceptance tests, you want the users to understand what all is happening and accept it. And yes, we also had to deal with people tracking their testing. They didn't too much overhead, administrative, blah blah blah. But we needed to have it. We didn't do much of this, but what we see happening more and more is as that testing occurs, we're able to use AI tools to really analyze some different what if scenarios and how the testing is actually happening. We were trying to do automated testing as much as we could. Automated testing works pretty good on a little component, but when you get end to end in automated testing, it's difficult to occur. And one other challenge we had, say we were trying to do something with a person that had been with the company for 15 years. Getting a record for them, a test record that showed their 15 years, their hire date was such and such a date and different things that happened, was a lot of work. I mean, you had to configure the user, get them into the system, and lots of work for that to happen. So it took a lot of time and resource in order to make those end-to-end tests happen, set up scenarios, set up the data, execute the test, validate the test, and then do any sort of learning from the test. So let me move into the AI pillar. Like I said, I know I'm going through a lot of topics here fairly quickly. AI is transferring it for everybody. I don't think I need to give an overview of what AI is. It doesn't pay patients, doctors, clinicians. From the system side, developers, analysts, help desk are being impacted. And from system support, we had a lot of work with data scientists. And our help desk is changing, and the security that we talked about in general. Some of these are going to be redundant. I've already talked about them. But AI diagnostic, the whole idea of prescriptive and predictive analytics, uh, precision medication, that's happening now where they're really tailoring the treatments with genomics and that they're going into different results of testing, different levels of certain things like hemoglobin, and that may change the dosage amounts. Virtual health assistants that people are using an AI agent in order to assist to deliver things. It's a big item that's occurring in healthcare. The AI-driven drug discovery, lots of things happening, especially in the United States with vaccinations and where those things are going forward. And then finally, just the whole optimization of the organization, AI in order to do smart scheduling, to be able to manage supply chain and et cetera. This was one of the pieces from our HIMSS, which is our Healthcare Information Management Systems. I mentioned that I got a presentation from them shortly before we started. This is their readout, and this is where they talked about what the AI functions for the future. Those of you not familiar in healthcare, Epic is the market leader in healthcare record keeping. And so we're looking at that specific. This, by the way, was a presentation, The Future of EHR, which is health research, by Dr. Spooner from Cincinnati Children's, where I'm at. So I just got this feedback 2 weeks ago. So just different things happen. The documentation, how the documentation is now getting large, especially since AI can generate some documentation, it generates a lot of stuff. Detection, real-time clinical documentation, conversational AI. So it's not necessarily keyed into the keyboard. It's doing voice recognition. Actually, Dragon, which is an AI reading or a voice mapping that takes voice patterns, voice recordings, and translates it into text to be able to store in the system. You can't really search on, voices. You got to be able to have some sort of data that whatever your search tool has can recognize. So then we're dealing here patient summaries. That's facing, that's being focused to the patient. The clinical trials. So these are just different areas that are occurring more and more where AI is helping. And one of the others, risk prediction. Not only risk of patient care itself, but risk of liability and responsibility to the hospital or for the hospital, and also to health of people in general. As I said, we're lots of data now we have, and COVID isn't the only significant public health crisis that's happened in the last 20 years, but we have more data to be able to generate more models and et cetera. Now, went into particular about problems with the AI promises I talked about before in the hype cycle, where we're kind of trending into disillusionment. Um, so we're treating AI not as a magic bullet, but as a high impact technology. So our initiatives could falter or lead to unintended risk. By the way, this graphic, I asked ChatGPT to generate a graphic for me. So, and it basically says AI promises based really on trust, building trust. And one of the problems that was mentioned by the HIMSS is only 42% right now have a formal acceptable use policy for AI. Again, we're talking human lives here. We're not talking, being able to manufacture routers for a local area network. We're talking about life and death situations. So the acceptable use has a lot of risk factors. So patient-facing applications, they really don't do well with emotion. We're having some trials that say, you've been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, blah, blah, blah. By the way, we understand your mother died of cancer. Can you tell me more about that? That's not very well suited to talk to somebody that's just having to deal with all those issues. And then we tried some things with artificial empathy. That didn't go over very well either. Then there's a bias in automation. There's a lot of bias in AI in general, and it can happen during the whole life cycle of AI. There's things such as data drift and inherent bias that happens, and one can sort of fuel the other, et cetera, et cetera. We're doing a lot of work on that area. And that instant efficiency isn't showing up. It's taking a lot of work. Sometimes it's taking us more human involvement than we had before. And these predictive models do not transfer well. And we actually have an issue. This came from PMI. By the way, PMI has a wonderful online course out there on cognilytics project management. That's the new PMI certification. And they talked about the proof of concept as, it's I gave credit to PMI is, yes, I captured the screen from the PMI course. The proof of concept, which demonstrates the concept in the test environment, may look pretty well. And the pilot is where you're really trying to use it. And what they're finding out is that the pilot, the real world, doesn't reflect well with the proof of concept because it's so antiseptic. There's so many variables in the real world. So this is a challenge that we're dealing with in healthcare, not just in healthcare, but primarily in healthcare with the high level risk. And moving on beyond the pilot proof of concept to the pilots does have real world value, but it also has a significant requirement of intellectual capital, analytical capital, critical thinking capital, what if capital. I'm not going into it here, but there's 7 patterns of AI that are discussed and illuminated on a core concept of the CPM AI certification. Those are all applicable to the POC versus the pilot. Next pillar, telehealth. We had to, when COVID happened especially, couldn't have face-to-face, we went to telehealth. If you would have told me that we could take a big, by the way, at this time I was at a different hospital. I was at the largest hospital chain in Columbus, Ohio, which had 14 hospitals, like 160 practicing offices, et cetera. If you would have told me that we could turn in within a month, that we could talk to everybody via telehealth, which is a WebEx, or we actually used Zoom, and then we went to Teams and et cetera for dealing with the patient line, drive up services. We actually brought routers out in the parking lots, put tents over them. I could tell you 100 stories on that, irrelevant. But that whole telehealth piece, wearables, connectable devices fit in with this too, is a major area that's still evolving. So things that are happening, the remote monitoring, the wearables, and the wearables are changing constantly. And as far as consistency in the wearables isn't there, they don't know. You can't just take, I'll use an example, you just can't take the sleep monitoring from an Apple Watch, combine it with the sleep monitoring with an Android watch, and combine it with the actual health monitoring of, say, a CPAP machine and have immediate alignment. There's usually factors involved. So that data integration is part of it. The security, secure Internet of Things, the remote patient monitoring. The patient needs to be able to move around also. Virtual consultations, care anywhere. We actually have at Children where there's devices that are available to children under the age of 14 where they can do actual remote monitoring of things. It has a camera so they can look at the throat of the student or the child without having to bring them in to the doctor. So supporting those, but those are where innovations are happening. And it's just not an IT thing. There's pharmaceutical project management jobs to make sure these work, the compliance and everything. There's the testing, there's the administrative, these pillars I've been talking about. And then chronic care, high risk patients, the virtual we talked about, and just in general, the AI enhanced telehealth. So as I said, there's lots of things I'm talking about here, and that's why I'm leaving these available to you so you can do a little bit more research. But the whole medical Internet of Things just has explosive growth going on. Just got 2 more pillars to go. Um, Said lots of stuff, trying to condense just a high level view, give you an idea of topics, and give you enough information that you can go and look at for some more. The security innovation, and it's not just physical security; it's also cybersecurity. The difference between the two: physical security is physical things that you can touch, access into a room, a card key to be able to have clearance at the door. The cybersecurity is access to the information, the applications, the Internet of Things devices. Talked about some of these before, but clearly some of the challenges, ransomware attacks, device exploitation of the Internet of Things. There's lots of things going on as far as AI prompt poisoning and other poisoning, corrupting the data. So AI tools now that are doing generative AI may not have as most accurate data as you'd want. So all those things fit together in the cyber world, and there's a lot of work going on at healthcare. Um, the breaches, theft or manipulation of sensitive data, physical access breaches, unauthorized entry to secure clinical areas. I mean, we do have issues. Actually, there was an issue in the United States within the last month where a person got into an MRI wearing a metal necklace. The MRI, which is a huge magnetic resonance imaging, is what MRI is. Pulled the person into the machine, and it was fatal. That individual was not able to survive that. How did they get into the room? That's a whole nother issue. It's a physical security issue. How was somebody able to get that close? We don't have all the answers. When I probably won't. There'll be research done, investigation, root cause stuff will come out on that sometime in the future. But those things are happening real today. And then hybrid attacks. So there's combined physical threats. The facilities combined, that all of a sudden they're able to make access to rooms available through key cards for staff that may be there to do work that's not clinical related. They may be able to make it in such a way where somebody that's wiring into a room in order to uh, put in some sort of cyber monitoring, that they're able to put in their own device to implement and be able to steal the data. That's just one example. But so they have the key card access to get in there, and then when they're in there, they do something cyber. Those are all things. Security needs to be extremely cautious, paranoid, and always fear for the worst case scenario. Prepare for it. There's 2 pieces of security I talked about: transformation of the physical, and there's just some examples. We kind of went through them. I'll go through that very quickly. I pretty well leave it up here. There is supply chain disruption and hybrid threats. From a cybersecurity, you know, these are more disruptive, but there's ransomware attacks. This whole phishing thing, that's still going on too. I mean, there's lots of people. As a matter of fact, I read something where in the United States alone, which has a different medical process in a lot of places because we are basically privately insured, that lots of billions of dollars of fraudulent claims through Medicare are made through different phishing and social engineering schemes. device exploitations. They're able to go in and corrupt some of these wearable devices. Um, Again, that's the list. I'm not going to go in there. But then supply chain even too, which is where a vendor could suddenly be able to go in and alter invoices to be paid. It's complex. So our conclusion is navigating complexity. And I've been involved in a lot of the security portion of the healthcare world. And like I said, there's lots of different areas that need to be investigated, both cybersecurity, physical security, preventative, responding to false positives, false attacks, etc., and also a ton of different sorts of penetration testing and phishing examples. So some of the things that are happening here, um, the security through various parts of the application journey, but the organizational politics need to be addressed. Just because somebody can have security doesn't mean they should have security. And we understand completely, I need that to do my job. Well, if it's something you see once every 6 months, do you need to have that security full time? Or we're building in processes now, reference Workday and this thing with calculated fields, where you have to submit a ticket into the help desk in order to request a window of time to have access to be able to touch a calculated field. So we're doing process changes, administrative changes, help desk changes, and et cetera, in order to enforce security. So those are all playing a factor, which goes back to the business side of the technology. I'm going to finish with my last one, which has to do with the human change in leadership part. The human changes are major. New care models, team structures. These are all in that very busy first paragraph, which show lots of things. But it boils down to, from our world, change management, which is change management is the people processes in order to adapt to all the changing technologies and other things going on to make sure not only are we prepared to deal with it, but our patients are prepared to deal with it. And some of the things that are human changes that require, I use the term ITIL change management to talk about a change to something within a system. You've probably all done that. If we're doing an upgrade to the system, there's a change control board. We submit a change request to that. They approve it and we implement it at scheduled time. And we have rules that you can only change what's been approved, et cetera. I'm talking about human change management more so, which is the people. They need to be aware that this enhancement is going in on such and such a date and time. What it is, they need to be aware to support people so they can be involved in testing, certification, et cetera. So some of the challenges there are the role reassignments. The whole change of communication. We're trying to do, people don't want to sit and watch a long-winded video. Our change people were saying, well, we need to have our videos in 2 minutes or less because people don't pay attention after 2 minutes. Well, some of our things are a little longer than 2 minutes, and we had this constant struggle. They wanted to make, I called it more edutainment than education because they wanted to make it kind of easygoing. You have a little animated person talking, instead of focusing a little bit more on the fluff than the substance. And we constantly had that discussion going on. The whole thing with team restructurings in order that to happen. The whole engagement with patients are happening differently. It's more involvement with patients at different stages of their care journey. And then the whole scheduling and triage approaches, how we actually access care and the modifications. And then the whole cultural alignment, differing values between staff and patients. I mentioned before that with the internet in general, there's a ton more access to information out there. With AI tools such as ChatGPT, people can have it go read their information or update their information because you can go into My Chart if you're an Epic user, download your diagnostic from a test, put that in a file, upload that file to ChatGPT and say, what does this tell me? And ChatGPT may come out with something a little bit different than their doctor. And on top of that, it may prescribe you should look into this, ask your doctor about that, which the doctor doesn't necessarily support and wouldn't have brought it up in the conversation anyway. So there's a cultural alignment that's happening. So we need to deal with the technical and human changes, and that's where change management comes in. And the challenges we have is that staff engagement. And again, we have to remember nurses, doctors, et cetera, are very busy caring for patients. I mean, we have the biggest population in the history of the world that is being treated today. So we haven't increased proportionally the medical staff to support people that we had the last 30 years. So we're trying to do more with less. The goals and resources, that's a universal problem. And then cultural and behavioral aspects. Okay, I am now going to leave with a graphic for you that sort of summarizes that picturally as generated by ChatGPT. So with that, I am now going to stop. We wanted some time for some questions. I probably went a little over on where I should have been, but I will stop sharing my screen. I guess I will go back to the area and see if there are any questions, chat or something. I do see one
Yeah,
here.
one
Okay,
question
go ahead.
from
I'll let
Mohammed
you.
Ijaz. Mohammed Ijaz, do you want to speak up?
Yeah, hi David. Nice meeting you, and it was a great enlightening session. And thank you, PMIK, for the opportunity. So I wanted to understand if there are specific standards, globally acknowledged standards, or some evolving standard wherein all these things around the AI into the healthcare management, different roles and responsibilities, how those are being audited or how those are being monitored. Yeah, thank you.
Standards, as far as international standards, there's technical standards that exist as far as some of the practices, medical practices. International standards, probably not. There are the Code of Ethics and Hippocratic Code, et cetera. But most hospital organizations, all that I've been involved with, do have local standards. And they are going to vary by culture and region and et cetera. And so, yes, they're monitored not as closely as we'd like because there's the human element. Patients in the United States have the right of refusal of recording a meeting with the doctor or a nurse. So it's hard to be able to monitor and enforce those, as you were saying about. So those are factors that come in, but there's a constant effort to try and learn from, improve those standards as far as engagement up and down the chain among clinical staff, among IT and the clinical staff, among clinical staff and patients. So the answer is yes, there's some, but it varies between what are industry standards and what are local practices and procedures.
Thank you. And I suppose there was some ISO standard numbering for the medical administrative management systems. It's something like ISO/IEC 42001. You might be aware of that. Yeah.
We are dependent on the vendor adhering to those ISO standards. We did not apply any of our test cases against the ISO standards against Workday, for example. The Workday product said that they were compliant with that, and we had enough stuff to test otherwise. But yes, there's a lot of trust. Talked about earlier about the whole thing with building with trust. So yes, we're trusting that our vendor is aligning with those ISO standards. Excellent point. As a distinguished project manager, you need to be aware of those factors and bring in the risk items and all those different pieces. I'm going to jump on. There was a question in here. Please show some light on the stand. Oh, that you just asked that, Mohammed. Okay.
Yeah, that's me.
Okay.
We have Anson Raj raised his hand. Anson, go ahead.
Hi, Dave. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, sorry about my croaky voice. I have a pretty bad cold and throat infection today. Yes.
Then you need telehealth.
Yeah, I think so. So just adding to Mohammed Ijaz's question, because when he asked that question, so I have this in my mind. So given you have all these 3 to 4 decades of experience. Do you believe the healthcare needs a dedicated AI governance framework, or can we achieve the same level of safety or ethics or um, you know, or innovation speed by evolving the existing regulations like what we have today, like the HIPAA or GCP or FDA? So what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's a loaded. That's probably a 1 hour discussion. Everything in the United States specifically, everything is being challenged right at the moment. There is an administration that's challenging. I think the HIPAA is going to stay because it is protection and safety, but lots of other things are being challenged, especially vaccinations at the moment, but also general practice. The United States has resigned from the World Health Organization again, which hurts that international aspect in major changes to the international aspect. So I don't know what the end result of that is, but it's clearly going through a transformation at the moment. When all said and done, I think we're going to go through a period of more personal choice, but I got a feeling that there's going to be something that's going to trigger going back to more standardization and sharing of data. I don't know where that's going to come. We need to have with that international human trust, which I think is the biggest component right now that is at risk. I think our human trust factor has greatly deteriorated in the last several years. So there's the technology aspect, as you said, the standards, guidance aspect, but then the humans being able to comply to that and build the trust with their partners in order for that to achieve success. So I don't have a crystal ball to say what it's going to look like in 5 minutes, let alone in 5 years. But
Yes, totally understood. Yeah.
it's going to change. I appreciate the way you're thinking. I think those are the critical thinking skills that we need to have happen in order to have a successful outcome.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And also thank you. It was a great presentation because you covered all these algorithmic biases and all the predictive analysis, precision medicine, AI-assisted decision making, basically, so, and all the remote care. So it was all good. I myself have worked on projects for JHU and Kennedy Krieger. So thank you. This presentation was wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Very difficult. I didn't whittle it down as much as I could have, but I could have had 20 other topics on here. There are lots of things are going on. Okay, I have another hand raised here.
I think that is
right?
from Jyotis.
Hi, good morning, Dave. Thank you for a wonderful presentation and talking about the vast opportunity for AI in healthcare. Coming to my question, if you could solve just one of those non-technical barriers you mentioned, like the process inertia or validation or empathy or the bias part, right? Which would that one be, like, to have the most progress for AI in healthcare?
I think empathy. I mean, we probably all have, once we realize we're talking to a bot, we probably have a different approach than if we don't think we are. And I'm not saying bot become human, but being more empathetic, because that deals with us on a personal level. It deals with the patient on a personal level, and that's where you make the gains. To do a little analogy on the side, I always chuckle when I read organizations that say we're driven data decisions, drive what we do is based on data. I say no, it's based on the story you tell that's supported by the data. So with that relationship, again, there's the data that's being communicated, but it needs to be communicated empathetically, which is the story we're telling and how we tell the story. So that's where I see the challenge and the big gain coming. But I'm one guy in a 4 billion people world that has an opinion.
Okay, that's actually a powerful thought. Yeah, empathy goes at the top. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
Thank you
because
so
we
much.
don't care how machines talk to machines, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's how humans are involved.
right. I was also thinking about bias being one of the other things. But yeah, I mean, obviously,
Oh,
I think,
we
yeah,
we can we can talk a lot about bias. Actually, I have a thing that I'm doing this week on AI literacy where I talk about bias, and I challenge people to go into pick your AI tool and ask it to generate a graphic of 4 people: a chief executive officer, a nurse, a teacher, and a troubled teen, and see what you get for your results. And that's an example of bias. And I'm sure in India you will get different examples because it's been built up with a bias. But in the United States, I could, with 97% accuracy, say your CEO is going to be a senior white male. Your nurse is going to be a female. That's just the biases that are built. That's an example of bias. And
Right.
I'm with you completely on that. It's a huge factor. And what's scary is there's people out there saying, well, AI eliminates bias. Believe it
Absolutely.
or not, I got a vent on this. I sat in a presentation earlier this year with somebody who was doing some sort of a tool for AI for project PMOs. Actually said, our AI tool eliminates the need for critical thinking. Like, you're kidding me. If anything, it increases the need for critical thinking. And I'm a firm believer in the human in the loop piece as far as taking action. I can't trust the tool completely. So I'm off my soapbox.
No, you're right. I mean, it sounds like tackling empathy and bias together could be the key to truly trustworthy AI solutions for healthcare.
Yep.
Thanks for sharing such a wonderful balanced
Okay.
perspective on this. Thanks.
Well, thank you. And by the way, if anybody, I have my email stuff in the slides there. I'm on LinkedIn. If you want to hook up or chat or whatever, I'll still be available. So with that said, I think I've reached my time limit here.
Yeah, thank you, Dave, for the insightful session. So let's move to the next. So let me share my screen so that we will see what is the next pre-conference series for us. Okay, let me share. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining the session. So next we have our pre-conference series 5 from Dr. Michael. So that will be tomorrow only, 7 p.m. So we will be meeting again. So this is especially exclusively for our waves registrants only. So that is another thing. And then we are giving you the PDU claim code. You can just take a screenshot or take a photo. This is the code. You can claim for it. I hope everyone took the screenshot. Okay, so with this, we will be wrapping up our session today. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you, Lejana. Thanks, David.
Thank you. Bye.